AI in your contact center. We're very excited to discuss this topic. My name is James Westbrook, and I'm the Solution Marketing Lead at 1904 Labs. A bit of housekeeping first. As you just heard, we are recording. We'll be sending the recording out to everyone who registered after the. You will have full access to that. All participants are automatically muted, but you can use the chat to ask questions or comment at any time. We do have time at the end to address questions from you. So please feel free to just put them in the chat as you think of them, and we will address them after we have gone through the rest of our agenda. Because we're from 1904 Labs, I'm going to give a really quick blurb about us. So we are a consulting company helping enterprises build human-focused modern software and data solutions, specifically in our AI-enabled customer solutions practice, customer service practice, which this group is from. We are focused on solving human challenges in the current contact center journey with AI. To introduce those of us who are speaking today, so Tom Thielen is the Director of AI-enabled customer service solutions at 1904 Labs. Before joining us, Tom spent 7 years managing technology product and operations teams at Centene Managed Care here in St. Louis, including its customer service product strategy, and has a long history helping enterprises realize the potential of tech. Brandon Fisher is the Director of our decision science practice at 1904 Labs. He's very kindly waving. He has over a decade of experience in data and analytics, and spent significant time in the marketing space before joining 1904 Labs over 3 years ago. And Carol Riggy is the Director of Solution Experience at 1904 Labs. She will be our moderator today, so you'll get to hear from her instead of me in guiding this discussion. Carol is a thought leader in the UX space and has over 30 years of experience in UX and user-centered design, and in conversational UX design recently too. I am now going to hand it over to Carol to set the landscape for what we'll be talking about today.
Thank you so much, James. You guys hear me all right? Yeah, okay, in the Zoom world, you always have to check. And thank you all too for joining us today. Let's start talking a little bit about customer service. We're going to tee up this conversation. So when we talk about customer service, you know, everybody on this call is very familiar with the traditional call center, where you call a phone number when you need some help. You hear a recorded voice telling you to listen to the menu. They'll probably tell you that the options have changed, so listen to the whole menu. You know that the drill. You select an option, and then you're routed to a live agent who may or may not be the right person to help you. That's kind of the lay of the land. In the modern contact center, because we are now using artificial intelligence tools and technologies, you not only can call a number in the first place, you can also access like a chatbot or a self-service application on the web, or you can speak to a virtual assistant on your desktop or even in your car or on your watch. And then all of these things are handled by an AI-enabled system that's not only capable of handling the task, but something else is happening in the process now that didn't happen in the past. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. What's happening in the modern contact center is that all along the way of the customer's interaction with the system, that AI-enabled system is gathering every bit of data that's exchanged between the customer and the system. So it's not only collecting the phone number that the customer is calling from, but it's collecting things like the caller's exact verbiage when they state why they're calling. Every time they touch the keypad, that's collected, and much, much more, which we're going to be talking about today. So in short, compared to the traditional call center, the amount of data in a modern contact center is massive. It's exploded. So what does this new AI-enabled data landscape mean for gathering, analyzing, and using customer insights? And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So if we can go to the next slide. James, thanks. We are going to be talking today about these three areas with our two experts, Tom and Brandon. We're going to address AI and what it means for customer service, data, and analytics, what it means to the contact centers, contact center managers, and customers, and then finally, what it means to the organization at large. And we're, as James said earlier, excuse me, we're going to leave plenty of time to address any specific questions you all have. So please remember, use the chat at any time, even now, to start adding your questions, and we'll be able to address them. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with Brandon, our data guy, right, to get the lay of the land. So if we can go to the next slide, James. The first question we want to drill down on, basically, Brandon, start us off. When it comes to applying AI to customer service, what does that mean in terms of the data and analytics? In other words, we just talked about the difference between a traditional call center and a modern contact center. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So, with a traditional call center, when you call in, you're given, essentially 10 options, right? At most. And based on that input, you get directed to somebody. And from a data capture perspective, there are certain things that can be counted, like how long you spend on the call, which of the 10 options you selected, when your hold time starts and ends, and then you reach a live agent. And sometimes right before you're handed off to the live agent, they give you the warning that your call might be recorded. But what that indicates is that there's only a small fraction of those calls that get recorded and then transcribed. And typically that's done by a human. And then they use that to assess and train call center staff. In the modern call center world, because we're using this AI virtual agent, first of all, we have unlimited number of intents and options that you can speak to the agent. And so you can say whatever you'd like now, rather than selecting from one of 10. And we're capturing the exact words that you say. And we're also monitoring how good this bot is at picking up on those words and matching those with one of the intents that we can service. Because we are capturing every transaction that a customer says, we're no longer sampling this, but now in real time, we have the ability to assess the language that customers are using and make determinations about what their needs are. If there is a way for the virtual agent to meet those needs, we can direct them to some kind of self-service portal. But then when we hand off to a live agent, if that's ultimately where it needs to go, we can take all the information we've learned and gathered from the customer, and now we can in real time serve insights and help articles and assistance to the live agent so that whether they were an expert on this thing you need help with, they can become that in the call to better meet and service your needs. And so that real-time feedback of everything we've learned that the customer has told us, and then using that to better service the customer in the call is really cool.
So you're just describing really a lot richer data, real-time data, quantity of data. One of the things when we were preparing for this webinar, the term came up, sentiment analysis. And so tell us a little bit about, is that something we can capture?
Yeah.
And what does it mean?
So if you're on the webinar, you can see we're an AWS partner. Well, my video is inverted, so Vanna White gestured the wrong direction. And so, when we'll talk about specific technologies, often we'll refer to AWS, Amazon Connect, and their capabilities. But with Amazon and Amazon Connect and AWS, with each thing that a customer says into the Connect landscape, they are assessing sentiment of that language. And so everything you say is then transcribed and it's processed by Amazon through a natural language processing algorithm, and it spits out some positive to negative sentiment assessment of those words. And so, yeah, we can understand as the call is starting whether or not the person calling in is upset about something or whether they are neutral or positive. And those kind of insights can then be readily passed to the agent as they begin the call so that they understand I'm stepping into what might be an upset customer, and that changes the way that you approach them and changes the way you approach the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, as a researcher, just the amount of data blows my mind, the way you're
Oh yeah.
describing it and the richness of it. So,
Well,
so I'm gonna,
so that's
yeah, go ahead.
actually, Carol, that's a really good point. So when we think about traditional call centers and we think about the data that they were creating, it was much smaller than what's being created now.
Yeah.
Because now we're capturing a lot of text, which tends to be bulkier data. Whereas before it was, timestamps, and it was IDs, and but it was smaller, much more manageable. And from a reporting and an analytics perspective, it serviced the call center's needs to know how many calls are in the queue, how long on average did people wait, how long do they spend with an agent. So you can get those level of insights, but now we can understand what specific things people are speaking about, and we can attach a lot more data and metadata to each call, and we can really dig into that. But it does bloat and make the data storage and data analysis requirements a bit bigger in this modern call center.
So there's a lot of implications to gathering all this data, right? There's implications on the technical side, there are implications on the business side. And actually that's where I'd like to take us next, if we can, and thanks for that overview of the richness and the amount of the data. That is just amazing. But I want to jump over to Tom for this next question. If we can go to the next slide. Given this wealth of data and the variety of data available in the modern contact center, what does this mean? And I'd like to spend a fair amount of time drilling down on this question, because this is pretty packed. What does this mean for the contact center? What does it mean if I am a manager of a contact center? What does it mean to me and how I do my job? And downstream, and very importantly, what does it mean to the customers? So I'm going to ask Tom. You have extensive experience working with contact centers. So I'm a CC manager. I'm a contact center manager. Things are changing. My world is changing. Sit me down. I want you to tell me, what does this all mean to me?
Carol, thanks. And I'm going to start at the beginning. And as you said, there's a lot. So as Brandon mentioned, what we're talking about here is changing the paradigm from the traditional IVR with the menu prompt system to a conversational option, where essentially you have a robot or an intelligent virtual agent picking up the call. And now, in addition to that, which is has some really big positive impacts, both for the customers who are calling and the operation of the call center, you have this data, as Brandon started talking about. You have essentially, you're capturing word for word everything the customer says, everything your live agent says, and everything your robot says. So there's more data. But then, as Brandon kind of mentioned, you have metadata. So you can tag the data, and essentially not just as a call recording, but you can tag it essentially every step along the way, where a customer is going from one prompt to another within their interaction with the robot, or in their interaction with a caller. So that means that you have customers' data, their demographics, product or service they're calling about data. You've got the driver or the purpose or the issue of the call, and then along with sentiment analysis. So you can not just determine that there is a call that's got negative sentiment. You can actually then dig in and see what words, phrases, what part of the call was driving the negative sentiment. So just to start with, there's a huge power in terms of what is possible in terms of mining that data. I like to think of it as, if in today's world, if you think about your customers going to your website or your secure portal, you capture an enormous amount of data about what screens they're going to, what buttons they're clicking, what they're asking for, and you know who the customer is, especially if they've logged in through a secure portal. So now you have the potential to have that same level of data, and potentially even more granular, for your voice calls, for customer service calls. So just to start with, that's huge. And then I would just start with kind of agents themselves and what this does for them. And as Brandon mentioned, you get real-time sentiment analysis, but if you think about the way that contact centers do quality management, they're sampling a number of calls to kind of confirm script adherence and things like that, but it's a sample. Now you've got the ability to not just rely on a sample for your quality management. You've got the ability to kind of look at an agent level across all their calls, either in a day or a week or a month, and essentially by checking the sentiment, checking kind of what their normal metrics, and then adding on top of that the ability to do coaching and follow up and see their trends, and then take that up to the next level, which is across your agents. Are you seeing trends where your scripts maybe have the potential to be driving some negative sentiment? So you're able to look at that. Or if there is a certain type of customer or a certain product that is driving negative sentiment that could be addressed via improvements or changes to your scripts, that really can have an immediate impact in terms of just at the agent level, kind of the coaching that's available to them and the feedback that's available to them, and then taking it out to supervisors, giving them that transparency again across all the calls, as opposed to just doing samples.
So I'm going to pick up on a couple of things you said. Let's stay at the agent level for a second. And there's interest, and somebody asked in the chat too, and I have the same question with regard to sentiment analysis. Just talking about the type of data you get, and Brandon referred to like being able to parse some of the words used by the caller and interpret sentiment based on their vocabulary. But can you also interpret sentiment based on tone of voice and volume of voice? Like, are those things possible?
I think the tone is a little more challenging, but volume is definitely something that can be kind of pulled into as a factor. I just want to, I know that Brandon mentioned this, and I want to point it out. Our partner that we rely on from a technology perspective in this is AWS. And if you think of Alexa, it's the same language model that's available essentially through their contact center technology platform. So they are continually improving both the language model and the ability to interpret what a caller or a speaker, if you're using Alexa, is saying, and what the intent might be behind what they're behind the word. And so whatever they have today, and if we can look back a few years, they've made huge strides in terms of interpreting and improving those language models, and then adding new features and capabilities to the technology that's available to layer on top of what used to be just a simple audio recording. Then you layer on top of that real-time transcription, then you layer on top of that sentiment, and then you can start to see where they're going in terms of the really applying AI and machine learning in their NLP model.
And Carol,
yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, please.
I see that Jeff asked this question. So Jeff, thank you for asking this. There are call recordings, and so you could save and store call recordings, and then you could do your own analysis on tone. But what I believe Amazon's methodology is for providing the real-time sentiment assessments is they will transcribe as individuals are speaking, and then they run against the transcriptions to produce sentiment scores based on frequency of word use and information like that. So you could, but I think based on the services that are provided by Amazon Connect, I believe the sentiment score is based purely on the transcription of the spoken words.
And that actually raises, you kind of teed up my next question, as did Tom, which is at the call center, at the contact center. The managers are getting data now. They're going to have all this new data, including things like sentiment and caller sentiment. Some of it's going to be real time. Some of it will be for later analysis. There's just a richness that explodes. And the call center managers I've worked with, they have spreadsheets that they use, like they churn them out on a weekly, hourly, daily, monthly basis, producing their KPIs, right? This is what's happening at my call center. They're very used to working with these spreadsheets and dealing with these metrics. And they're asking the question, how is my life going to change, right? I'm a call center manager. Can I get the same stuff? Am I going to still be able to use my old spreadsheets? Are you going to make my life more complicated because of all this stuff? Or is it going to be easier because of all this stuff? So which of you guys want to tackle that?
I'll take a shot first, and I'll just say they'll certainly get everything they have today. So basic kind of management of the call center. So in real time, calls in queue, things like that. And then looking kind of at calls as they're going, handle times, and that sort of thing. And then taking a step beyond that, things like the satisfaction scores, and first call resolution scores, things like that are still going to be available. But now you're going to have it again. This is everything you had before, plus this richness, which again, this is part of the what this is bringing. It's providing more granularity along with the real-time capability. So there's the potential for doing proactive intervention. So not just kind of prompts for the agent, but actually having a supervisor seeing sentiment scores going negative on a live call, and then having them to be able to do that proactive intervention in some way. So that's the kind of the short answer is they get everything they have plus more, and hopefully, the more is going to be things that are easy to comprehend, easy to understand, and make their ability to manage that kind of that group of agents and really keep and really looking at their existing metrics and how to improve them.
Yeah, and what I would add is when we set out to work with a customer on one of these AI-enabled call centers, we have a data mapping activity that we undertake where we spend time in our discovery efforts to understand what it is that the client is tracking today and how they're using those metrics, and how their current system counts those specific KPIs and underlying metrics to say a call is counted as this. And then we will map that so that it's counted in the same way as we deploy using Amazon Connect and AWS, so that they suddenly don't see a 20% increase in calls, not because more people are calling, but because the way we've defined call is different. We ensure that it's an analogous mapping from moving from one system to another. And so nothing is lost from their current reporting. And as Tom said, we're just going to add a bunch more insight on top of that and give them next level insight to what they're already interested in, what they already care about.
Yeah, and so I'm going to speak as a user interface person. A lot of our users who are used to spreadsheets just love them because they're very efficient and the spreadsheet format is great. But a lot of the work that we do where we migrate folks from a sort of an old technology to a new, more data-rich technology is being able to serve up things like dashboards, at easier, more efficient interfaces and different ways to get to those same data, and drill down on that data rather than things like static spreadsheets. So if I don't know if either of you have experience or anything you want to add about sort of the interactions between the folks at the contact centers with the data as opposed to just the data.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the AWS world. So, as data is being produced, it's dropped into log files, and those log files can be ingested to any data store. So you can throw them to S3, you can throw them to Microsoft, wherever it is that you want them to live. They can be pushed to those locations, and then it's a matter of accessing them from your favorite data store for whatever reporting needs that you have. With our clients, we can build those pipelines for you, throw them to S3 where they'll be stored, and then build a pipeline that moves them to a Tableau data server so that you can do all your reporting through Tableau, or to Azure, and you can do it through Power BI, or so connecting to your reporting and dashboarding platform of choice is absolutely something that could be done for anybody that decides to do this implementation.
So integration with existing systems is something that I'm hearing in what you're saying, right? Like, where's the potential there that we didn't have before? And what kind of existing systems? Are we talking things like CRM systems, in addition to what you were just talking about, Brandon and Tom? What have you seen too in contact centers? That integration that really takes things to the next level.
Your ability to integrate is entirely up to your desire for integration now. You can pull in and query against all kinds of systems because you have that flexibility to plug and play and build the experience that you want. On the back end of reporting, we can move data out of this to anywhere that you want it to be, but you can also do integrations in the call flow itself.
I just adding on to that, it's kind of the same integrations you might have with your IVR today. So some basic kind of customer data. So to do identification and authentication, if you're going to do self-service, or even if you're just trying to identify the customers before the calls get routed to a live agent. So that's available. And then I think the real power comes in when you start thinking about self-service and the expanded opportunities, both for improving self-service capabilities that exist in today's IVR, and then stepping beyond that into new use cases or scenarios that are either really difficult or in some cases almost impossible to self-serve via a virtual agent versus a live agent. And so I think what Brandon was talking about is essentially with the AWS platform, as long as there is data available to be ingested, and it's two-way API type capabilities, that integration I think is kind of set up, ready to go out of the box. And Amazon or AWS has partners that build specific types of software around data analytics that plug in almost directly. So you're not spending a lot of time either building, updating, or maintaining data flows. So there's a great opportunity with that integration that really is both the input side and drives that. And then I guess the other piece I would say is back to the CRM is if you have a conversational virtual agent that's answering the call, speaking with the customer, understanding why they're calling, understanding a little depth, all of that then can be transferred over to a live agent if a live agent is needed, so that the customer doesn't have to essentially repeat themselves, and the agent has all the information to start. So you're talking about improved satisfaction and reduced handle times for the agent themselves. And
you just again teed up my next sort of prompt to you guys, which is, I'm a UX CX person, right? So I care very strongly about what happens to the customer, right? How is this changing their world? They're downstream of all of this innovation. What are the differences in terms of their experience that happened because of this pivot to the new world of AI-enabled customer service? So let's start with Tom there.
So thank you, Carol. And if you think about this is really a game changer from an experience point of view for a customer. So the idea that you can have a conversational agent that's picking up the phone versus a traditional menu IVR system, and that conversational agent is going to be able to get much richer information from the customer. And if the agent's able to determine that this virtual agent is able to determine that it can provide self-service for the customer, essentially, then it becomes an immediate pick up a discussion versus figure out which menu button you need to press, and then potentially doing self-service directly in a conversational type dialogue versus that without any hold time. So you have the potential to really drive improved experience, reducing customer effort scores, improving satisfaction scores. It's a real game changer just from the capability itself. And I could keep going, but I'm gonna stop there because there's a whole nother layer of improvements that can be done with the call data itself.
Well, and so let's talk about the customer a little bit more. So when you think about this new call center platform, what improves the customer experience is the ability to integrate data from multiple other places in the organization to the customer experience. So we have people have probably experienced it where you call in, and as you're greeted, they try and prompt you with who you are, and it says, I recognize the phone number you're calling from. Am I speaking with Brandon? So now I haven't even had to provide them my information. They've already looked up my phone number based on where I'm calling from, matched that to an account, and now they're asking me to confirm my identity. And from there forward, they'll refer to me by my name. Like you've humanized this interaction, and you've saved me the effort of providing account information or touch. That's the kind of customer experience gain that you can make by doing these data integrations throughout the customer experience. As you get to the next step, it could say, I notice you have a power outage. If it's an electric utility company, I notice your service location. Are you calling about this? So you can prompt and show the customer that you are ahead of their needs and that you're already working on their problem. And so, these customer experience, and it's all because you're integrating this data throughout this call pathway and with multiple other systems to really improve and you can, from a sentiment and experience perspective, you can calm down a lot of customers just by acknowledging that you're aware of an issue for them. It goes a long way to improving that customer relationship.
Yeah, and Tom earlier used a term, proactive intervention, and that it sounds a little bit about like what Brandon was just talking about, which is things happening in real time that can significantly improve the customer experience. Can you drill down a little bit on what proactive intervention means in this context?
So that's a pretty broad term, and I'll use it in the context of a caller who's made a customer who's made a call every day this week, and they are looking for a status on a package, or they're looking for a status on a transaction, and they get to day 4 and they're calling, they're asking for the same thing. So essentially any information that might be available to a live agent can be made available to the intelligent virtual agent, so that you can essentially design it such that instead of just giving once you know who the customer is, instead of just going through the standard kind of series of questions and prompts and dialogue, you have essentially escalation levels, so that when that person calls the 4th time, the intelligent virtual agent can acknowledge that, hey, I noticed you've called every day this week, and I can attempt to help you, but I can also transfer you to a supervisor directly, because this, obviously you care about it and we care about you as a customer. And so that's what I mean when I say proactive interventions. Now there's different levels of that, but when you think about and then you can layer on that with sentiment. So a customer is speaking with the intelligent virtual agent, and the sentiment score goes way down, that you can essentially then do proactive intervention. So a supervisor could see that happening and jump into the call and essentially start interacting with the customer. And that can be done seamlessly, so that the virtual agent can say, hey, I'm struggling with you. I understand you're having a problem that I probably can't help you with, and here I already have a supervisor ready to talk to you, and then introduce the supervisor essentially in real time to the customer. So if you think about satisfaction scores, personally, I've had challenges with IVR. So if I'm trying to find the right option or do self-service, and it makes me want to pull what little hair I have left out. But if you think about that interaction, if I'm sounding unhappy or using words that are negative, if a live supervisor could then jump in and say, wow, you're a very valued customer, we'd like to take care of you, that my mood's going to change immediately. So
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I find fascinating, and we'll spend a few more minutes talking about the customer, and then I want to move on to some of the implications for the organization at large, and how they handle this, is what are some of those things that can happen while the customer's on hold? If you have this wealth of data by virtue of the AI enabled customer service systems, are there things you could do when the customer's on hold, for example, that might improve their experience?
Absolutely. So you can start with something as simple as, hey, are you aware that you can do this same thing that you're trying to request either on the website or on your mobile app? And then essentially follow on with, if you don't want to hold, our current hold time is X, and if it's too long, we could schedule a time to call you back. And then if it seems like a customer that has a propensity to essentially is look for new and interesting products or services, you could essentially turn that a service call into a revenue call, or and again, all because you have the customer specific information tied to the virtual agent, and the virtual agent has all of that at hand and can talk to the customer as if they are a human while you're waiting for a live agent, if that's necessary.
Yeah, and the hope is, Carol, that by implementing self-service procedures, that we reduce or eliminate the need for callers to sit on hold. Can we alleviate the burden on the live agents in the call center, so that now they are always available at the moment someone needs them, and otherwise many of our customers calling in can be serviced through one of these self-service pathways.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And as a customer, like, that's music to my ears, right? The less I have to deal with anything external, the more I could do myself, the happier I tend to get. And I also get the sense that we could probably spend the next 6 hours on this slide alone, but I want to address the next slide, which talks more about the organization as a whole, right? So, and I'm going to start this question, I'm going to throw this one to Brandon. So we talked about contact centers, contact center managers, and those in that orbit, customers. But what about others at the company? What are some of the opportunities and maybe some of the challenges for a company, given the AI-enabled customer service, the wealth of data and analytics? What are some of the things that affect the company at large?
Yeah, so as we've been building out this offering and really trying to unpack the analytics and the data needs of building out these modern call centers, we started by saying, first and foremost, we have to be able to serve the operational reporting needs that organizations have today from their call centers. So let's reach parity with what they have, and then let's improve on that. We now have these new bots that are going to be interpreting language and trying to do self-service work. So we also need an insights stream that is going to be monitoring the bot's ability to match language to needs. And so we're going to want to monitor that so that we can do optimizations on that. And then there's everything the customer has said. And sometimes there are going to be things that we can learn from that language that doesn't need to go back to the call center to improve training for agents or add new self-service pathways, but somebody else in the organization is going to care about that. And so if you get a number of customers who are calling in that say, I tried to pay my bill online, but my account number seems to be misprinted on my bill. Well, the call center can help them pay their bill. That's fine. But somebody from billing needs to be notified that we have some people who maybe misprinting account numbers, or there's some kind of a printing error. And so those insights need to leave from what we've learned and what we've captured. And so how do we create this insights pathway for things that can go elsewhere in the organization? And that's one example. But if you're someone who works in product development, you now have a super rich field of data to mine so that you can understand what products people are calling in, what aspects of those products they like, what aspects of those products are they struggling with. Before, you may have gone out and done very expensive research projects. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that anymore, but now you have an existing data set that you can go to mine, and you can pick out key things about what product, what service, what issue customers seem to be experiencing. And if there's a pattern, now you can take that and you can do something with it. And whereas before in the previous world, we were only capturing samples, small counts of this. Now, every single person that calls in and every single word they say is captured and transcribed. And so you can mine that for any purpose.
Yeah. And Tom, I'm going to ask you to pick up on that. And if you could start with, like Brandon alluded to, folks perhaps in other departments and billing, and even folks who are doing things like the logistics behind sending bills and printing the bills and all of that. Like, what are the we had this question come in, what are some of the roles in the organization beyond contact center managers, who we kind of focused in on, that would be affected by this movement to AI enabled customer service?
So great question, and Brandon alluded to this. So first of all, marketing teams will love to see this, especially the ability to marry this very rich voice transcription data with tags, and the ability to essentially use AI machine learning to identify patterns and trends across customer segments and products and geographies. So there's a huge amount of just insight that can be learned from analyzing the live voices of what your customers are saying, and then you can marry that essentially with the data that most companies are already analyzing from their web traffic. So both their public web and their portal information, and so you can tie that via your customer ID or your products, and you get a much richer view of those customers. I think the other Brandon alluded to is products or service design. So, what are people actually saying about their product? I have a printer that has a certain challenge, and I call about that, and I'm one of many people calling about that same challenge. Well, in today's world, in a lot of cases, a printer company can essentially push a software update to improve that capability or that feature that is causing people to struggle with the use of the printer. So if you think about that sort of insight, it really starts to become very powerful, not just for the contact center and not just for marketing, but then starting to branch out into other operational areas. I have a story that kind of along those lines that was operations. And so if you have ever tried to use a traditional IVR for anything to do with your health insurance, or maybe even your hospital system, or your primary care physician, oftentimes when you call, they're trying to identify you by your member ID. And I don't know about all of you, but oftentimes there are at least a half a dozen numbers on that card. And so there is the potential, and we've seen this, where the placement or kind of the way that the actual number that that the system is looking for is kind of highlighted on the card will get you a much higher hit rate in terms of actually identifying the caller and authenticating them. And so you can get feedback to operations and say, hey, can we somehow either highlight the number that is the real number that they need to use, or put a little underline under, or bold it, so that we can get at that more quickly. So there's a lot of power just in what seemed like simple things that become really hard in an IVR you can capture those sorts of problems much more easily in this new world of this rich speech analytics capability.
And so there's flexibility in what you can get out of the data, which is infinite, we'll say. There's also flexibility in what you can do with the system. So if you are part of some department in an organization that has never cared about customer call center information before, in part because you're not part of the call tree, there's nowhere through the various options that they would ever be directed to you. Now you can have as many pathways in a call center as you'd like. So if you just want to collect feedback on your specific area, you can add an intent. And now if someone calls in and says, I want to leave some feedback for billing, there's a voicemail box that's at the end of this pathway where people can just call and leave feedback, right? And so there's this flexibility that if you want to get insights about the work that you're doing you now have a pathway to collect that. And there's that flexibility in the data where if you're in marketing and you want to learn, there's a question that was thrown out there about customer retention and acquisition. There's information in customer feedback in the call centers about the happiest customers, the most satisfied customers. And so you can have an analytics and data science effort to go in and identify the most satisfied customers and find out what they've talked about, what products they have. And you can match that to the CRM data to understand how long they've been a customer, what else they've called about. And so you can do an investigation to understand all of this data now, because we have the flexibility to match against all the other data that the company has about a customer and everything that every interaction we've ever had with this individual, this customer. So there's so much information to be gained because now we can integrate and we have all of the communication that's captured through the call center.
And just to piggyback on that, again, as a UX CX person, the thing that really blew my mind is that in the past, we could probably gather the things you were talking about by increasing the number of menu options from 10 to 75, right? But who would want to navigate a menu like that? And that reinforces the fact that that kind of model is driven from the company out to the customer. Whereas with natural language processing and AI-enabled systems, it's driven from the customer. It totally flips the whole equation. So they could say anything. And the idea on the business's side is you just have to be receptive to what they're saying, but they're driving. You're not locking them into 75 menu options, right? And making them choose among them. But you build your system to be able to listen to and interpret what they're saying, and they're basically driving it. So that one fact, just again, when I started getting into this whole area of CUXD, it just changed the whole equation. The potential on the system side is tremendous. So, and I'm gonna kind of we've got about 10 minutes till the end of our scheduled time, and we had a question here. I kind of want to weave into or maybe our last topic here, and it's about call center volume. And it says call centers seem to always have higher than expected call volume. And officially, James, if you want to flip to the next slide, we're kind of now into user Q&A. I'm kind of interested in how that can be handled with AI that maybe was not possible earlier. So are there ways to handle call volume? And what are things that can be done when volume is high versus low, or in having data about when volume has been high versus low? I'm going to start with Tom on this one.
Sure. So the starting point would be just, most contact centers have historical trends on what days of the week are high call volumes, what months of the year, if there's any seasonal trends, and then hours of the day. They understand that, and they attempt to staff to that. And so just off the top, if you can increase your self-service or your containment rate with your self-service capability in these virtual agents, your demand, you're gonna cut down on the number of calls needed to be handled by a live agent. The other piece is instead of saying, hey, we're experiencing high call volumes, and just leaving it at that, and that doesn't feel very good. If the virtual agent says, hello, we are really busy, and does it in a human voice, is there a time, is this really urgent, or is there a time a little later today that we could call you back so you don't have to wait? Those are the kind of experience things that I think, Carol, I know you really value, which is that sense that you're talking to someone as if they were a very helpful human versus a very static kind of mechanical recording that just the first thing you want to do when you hear that is probably hang up. But so that's really, I think, the starting point of where that goes. And that's a great question, because many call centers seem to have that up regularly.
And so when you have a call center that's telling you we're experiencing higher than expected call volume is high, but also average time to handle is also high. And so to shorten that and to eliminate that congestion, you need to either increase the number of agents, or you need to increase the speed with which agents can address each caller so that they can move through this queue faster. And so that's one of the things that having this AI-enabled contact center allows us to do, is we're gathering information from the customer about their issue so that when we hand them off to an agent, we can hand them off to a specialist in their issue or their concern. And now their issue can be handled much faster. And we can limit the amount of time they have to spend with that human and addressing their issue. And so if you can do that now, you can better target these calls to a specialist. In the past world, you're throwing everyone to a general queue, and you're trying to train every call center agent to be a generalist across a lot. And what ends up happening is you get passed off to someone who says, oh, you didn't need to talk to me, you needed to talk to this other department. Now I'm going to pass you to them. And so you play this runaround game where you get handed off to 4 or 5 people. The other thing that these systems can do is we can be providing real-time insights to the agent so that they're better equipped to handle your issue. And now we can speed through this handle time faster, and hopefully we can reduce that congestion in the queue. And we no longer have to present the public service announcement that we're experiencing higher than expected call volume.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would imagine, so any one gain kind of redounds all the way up and down the chain, it sounds like. So you gain in all along from a time perspective, from an experience perspective, and it's not just you pick out one little thing that got better. It really just kind of ripples all the way up and down the chain is the way I interpret that. So we are really super close to the top of the hour. And what I'm going to do is hand back to James. If we do have any time for questions, he can let me know any additional questions. But James, you want to wrap us up and then let me know where you want to go from here?
Sure. Thanks, Carol. I think we have time for one more, and I think we addressed most of them. So I'm just going to put out here the other one that I saw, which is, what is next on the horizon to reduce customer frustration with not speaking to a human, which I'm sure, as we've talked about with IVRs, is often a problem.
I think I'll try that real quickly. And this is essentially, even if you have a virtual agent that is really well designed, does a great job of conversing with your customers, there still may be some things that are just difficult to do via voice. So you can essentially kind of take away the old model of I'm on a phone and I'm on a phone only, and think about the idea that the agent could say, hey, I need a serial number from on that printer that you're calling about. If you can take a picture of that with your cell phone and text it to me, I can read that number. I can understand exactly what sort of printer you have, and potentially even do diagnostics on your printer. And you don't have to read me figure out which of the 25-digit numbers on the back of the printer is the right one, and then try and read it to a human. So if you're trying to read a long string of digits like that to a human, they would really struggle. But because of the AI capabilities, that's something that's very real today, and can really change the way someone thinks about either their product or their service that they're struggling with, because you're now not just you're now essentially simultaneous multi-channel capabilities to deliver the service that the customers are really looking for.
The other thing that I would add is the kind of customer that calls in and just starts screaming operator and wants to talk to a human. We need to change the user experience so that they, to some extent, forget or maybe never even acknowledge that they're interacting with a bot. So as a person calls in, and we have all of this data that we can collect and verify about the caller at the time that the call is answered, we can hopefully get to a point where we direct their call to someone without even asking them for input, without even making them interact with a bot. So at the point that they call in, we know the number, we look up the account, we identify the issue, and we prompt them to say, I noticed this thing, I noticed who you are, would you like me to direct you to so-and-so? And the call is moved. And now we've provided all of the value up front without making them answer 7 questions to get there, which is what they're frustrated by. So we improve that experience, we provide the value quickly, and now we've reduced that customer frustration, and we've proven the value of having this AI-enabled customer experience.
Thanks, Brendan, and thanks, Tom, too. I know we're at the top of the hour, and I just want to thank you. This was really informative, and thank you, everyone, for attending. And I'm going to ask James to take us to the top of the hour.
Great. Thanks, Carol. Yes, thank you for all your questions. It was very much appreciated, and thank you to our fantastic panel and moderator for going through this discussion. We will be sending a replay out to everyone who attended. And we would also love to hear back from you on any topic you'd like to hear us examine in the future. We do have a plan to continue this going through this year, and we have a schedule of topics mapped out. But if there's anything that you'd be interested in, feel free to respond when Tom sends out the replay tomorrow, and we will definitely be interested in what you're interested in hearing about. We'll send out our invite in the near future for the next webinar, so look out for that. And thank you for attending. And we look forward to seeing you again as we go through 2022 now.